February. It's Black History Month.
That's right. Important month.
This episode's coming out one day before the start of February.
Ooh.
And to kick off, a lot of listeners will be listening to this in February. So to really kick off our celebration of Black History Month and to remind everybody the purpose of it, I think we should start with some good old-fashioned racism.
Oh,
from one of my favorite conservative commentators, Charlie Kirk.
Classic racist right there. Yeah. Hallmark racist.
Yeah. No, really like 1850s racism.
Literally 18. Wasn't he the guy that said we need to go back to the 50s and deal with these issues like they did in the 50s?
Yeah. So Charlie Kirk is just a classic racist conservative. Haven't heard from him very much lately.
He fell off.
But, Black History Month is a time for reflecting and celebrating the accomplishments of Black people in this country, but also reminding ourselves how bad it was before.
Exactly.
And the trials and tribulations that we've gone through to make it better, even if we're not completely at a point where it's very good.
Dare I say it should also be a time to just wholeheartedly and unrelentingly clown on racists.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's that certainly, but I also want to take a chance to look at what conservatives have on offer in terms of what society would look like if they got in control.
Exactly. Let's look at what they want.
Yeah, so I've got a clip here from Charlie Kirk's podcast called Thought Crime. And that's certainly what it's about to be. So buckle up for this take. It has to do specifically with DEI practices, which has been the kind of culture war thing recently. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
And that's why I think this United story and the DEI story hits so hard, because we've all been in the back of a plane when the turbulence hits, or when you're flying through a storm and you're like, I'm so glad I saw the guy with the right stuff and the square jaw get into the cockpit before we took off. And I feel better now thinking about that.
You want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, you wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have done that before.
That's not an immediate.
No, you wouldn't have done that before.
That's not who I am. That's not what I believe.
I think that's who you are.
What I believe. That's what you said.
I think that might be racism.
You said, if I see a black pilot, I'm shaking in my boots.
Now, I feel like I shouldn't have to do this, but the reason that there's the reason that they're talking about this is the reason that they're talking about this is because airlines have started implementing DEI practices, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has been this sort of boogeyman for people on the right because they don't like minority people. But right now there is a pilot shortage in the United States, specifically because a lot of pilots are old white men. That's a small subset of the U.S. population. So in an attempt to sort of recuperate losses and fill the positions they need in order to make sure we're having all the flights that we need going around the world. Because these old guys,
they're retaring.
Yeah, the airlines have implemented these DEI practices to appeal to broader ranges of the U.S. population to fill the slots that they need to make sure the flights can go. By the way, same thing that the U.S. military does.
Yes.
Something to keep in mind. That's the only reason these DEI practices really exist. They need to fill these positions, and old white men aren't going to cut it anymore. I promise, flight school still exists. Still got to go through flight school.
Yeah.
If you see a black pilot and your first thought is, I bet he's not qualified, that's racism.
That's on you, dog.
That's racism.
That's on you.
I don't know what else to say. That's racism.
It's also insane because a really common myth that we see when conservatives talk about DEI is that any person that frankly isn't a straight white guy that's in a position is underqualified and strictly a diversity hire, when honestly most of the time the minorities in those positions have to be overqualified to even get a seat at the table, to even get through the gatekeepers to have an opportunity to be considered for this position.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even argue that like these DEI practices are necessarily sufficient in overcoming barriers for groups that have been historically gatekept from industries like the airline industry. But that's exactly why they have to exist now. Yeah. Even again, if they're not fully sufficient, is because the industry, or I suppose the job of pilot, has been gatekept specifically for white men.
Yeah.
And because those white men have aged out of the positions, they have to implement policies to appeal to a broader range of the U.S. population in order to get the pilots we need.
And it's like, dog,
and that's not like selecting for race. Like, you're not just plucking someone off the street and saying you're a pilot now. Again, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this because what he is saying fundamentally is, if I see a black person, I don't think they're qualified.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, oh, if I have a black surgeon going in, it's like, oh, well, did you really pass your boards?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Come on.
Like, and that's never a thought I have if I'm getting on a plane.
That's never a thought that I've had before.
Yeah, and the first guy's like, I'm glad if there's turbulence, there's someone with a square jaw up there in the pilot seat. Like, dog, I'm not thinking about that at all.
It's crazy because he said everything Charlie Kirk was going to say, but like at least he hit it behind something.
Yeah, and Charlie Kirk comes through with this sort of like conciliatory, like, I don't want to think this way. It's just how it is. It's like, dog, own it.
Come on.
Say it with your chest.
If you don't want to think this way, you don't have to.
Like, just make it quicker for all of us. We don't have to like beat around the bush. You don't have to pretend it's not what you believe. Just say you don't want black people to have these jobs.
Holy shit.
Just be honest about it. Like, it makes it easier for me as a commentator. It makes it easier for you because you don't have to put up this charade that you're not actually racist. Just say you don't want black people to be pilots. Or you don't think they're qualified. You don't think they're good enough for it. Like, come on, be honest.
So fucking, because it's Charlie Kirk has always been this figure that's been I want to say like maybe adjacent to alt-right, if not full on alt-right.
Yeah.
But that's just a Nazi take, dude.
Yep.
That's wow.
Speaking of Nazis and other culture war items, Tom McDonald.
Oh, dropped the number one single on iTunes.
on
iTunes, very important metric.
Yeah, he dropped this single with Ben Shapiro, and the whole idea, I think the song is called Facts.
Yes.
And the whole the chorus of the song, I suppose, is I don't care if you're offended.
I don't care if you're offended.
There it is. Yeah. Kind of seems like you care a little bit. You made a whole song about it.
That's what I'm saying.
It's like if I wrote a book and I was like, I don't care if you read this.
Nobody cries that much about shit they don't. I do not care if y'all listen to this episode. I do not care if y'all turn this off right now.
A little bit.
Oh my God, man. I don't care if I offend you. There's one bar that Tom McDonald, we got to talk about, Tom McDonald before we get in the real meat and potatoes. Ben Shapiro's featured. Never thought I would have heard that in my entire life, right?
There's Tom McDonald's discography, yeah.
I'm saying where he talks about like nobody can hang up an American flag anymore. They were all replaced by BLM and LGBTQ flags. Dog, come on.
You're Canadian. You're Canadian. What are we doing here, man?
You're not from here.
Yeah. You don't belong in America. What are we talking about? It was also sick as hell to see Tom McDonald post this sort of like album cover or whatever it was, the cover art.
Yeah.
On Twitter, and a bunch of people responded like, "Oh, they got you, Tom." Like, "Oh, you're making a song with one of them," being anti-Semitic because Ben Shapiro is Jewish. That was nuts, crazy,
man. All I'm saying, if there's one immigrant that we do need to get out of this country, that we genuinely need to get out of this country, if there's one immigrant we need to crack down on, it is Tom McDonald. Because he needs to be stopped. And it's also funny because like I'm sure Tom McDonald is celebrating this like as a win somewhat, because the song, I don't know, maybe it's performing well. I don't know. They like to say it is because it's topping the iTunes charts.
Yeah, that's the thing that confuses me is anytime we have one of these big conservative songs, happened with that one dude who dropped like the country song back in summer. You remember that one?
Oliver Anthony.
Yeah. Dropped the country. I'm glad you just remember his name.
Big fan.
But they drop these songs and they're like, oh my God, number one on the iTunes charts. Isn't that for people that are going out and like purchasing the song individually?
That's what I'm saying.
Like nobody does that except like old people, I would assume, because that's not how you you stream it now. You get the Apple Music subscription or the Spotify subscription, and then you listen to it. God, so I don't know if that's an accurate metric of how popular a song is.
But it's also like when the song dropped, I thought it was fake. I did not think Ben Shapiro was actually on the song because God damn it, man, his flow sounds AI generated.
Yeah,
it sounds like Tom McDonald wrote a shitty verse and put it into a Ben Shapiro AI thingy and just had it spit it out because it does not sound like real. It does not sound like a person getting.
But in the music video, Ben Shapiro's there. I guess they could have edited that too, but he's there.
I mean,
standing in a hoodie.
He is there. Like it is him rapping, if you can even call it that.
Well, that's not music, according to Ben Shapiro.
I'm saying he had this whole thing. Rap is a degradation of jazz, which is a degradation of classical music. Oh my God, man! And it's also nice to see that Tom McDonald tries to be a serious rapper.
Yeah.
Tom McDonald takes himself as a serious rapper. No one that listens to rap listens to Tom McDonald. Anyone who heard this song is only talking about the Ben Shapiro feature. No one is talking about Tom McDonald's portion.
We've been on the Tom McDonald wave since 2021.
Yes, sir.
We were with him from the start.
Well, I
remember we had one segment on the show like early on, like probably before episode like 25 or something, where we're reading lyrics and we're like, this guy sucks.
Hell yeah.
Like these don't even go to get. Like you could go and listen to it. Very old episode. I don't know if we were as good as we are now, but the point is, we've been following Tom McDonald and his career with interest. And the song kind of sucks.
I just like all of his songs fucking
of
suck.
Course.
You know what I mean? I just wonder how he approached Ben Shapiro to do this.
I don't know. Because it's not supposed the rap isn't music to Ben Shapiro.
It's not music. Oh, rap's not music, but here I am talking. Such a good thing. The
Interesting
fact that he called it facts. The fact that there's a bar where he says, "I'm thinking, what would Ben do?" The dick riding is crazy. The dick riding is absolutely atrocious. Get this porn off my screen.
Might have to give Ben his flowers on this one because this is doing better than any of his other music ever did. His violin shit or whatever shit he did singing.
This is his most successful writing effort.
Yes.
I mean, what can I say? Dog, this is a Yamaka, homie, no cap. It's kind of a bar.
Yeah, but then his
It's
verse,
unfortunately a bar.
his verse falls off right after that, though.
Oh, yeah, he starts
There's no
talking
other
about,
bars. It stops rhyming. It stops rhyming.
He says, I get racks from compound interest. You can't say racks. First off, you can't say that. It sounds wrong when you say that.
Yeah, then it falls into like the conservative traditionalism rhetoric when he's like, I have a home and you're living with your mom or something like that. It's like, what? What are you talking about?
There's one point where he says something about like, I watch you go to jail on TV. Dog, what? What
who are you
talking about?
Free Jeffrey. Like, what do you mean? Welcome back to Head in the Office, everybody. Top of the episode, I'll let you know we're talking about the New Hampshire primary today.
Have to.
We're talking about Civil War, which I know is why all of you are here this episode. Biggest news story this week, and we'll get to that very soon. Related to that, we got an immigration deal.
We got to talk about immigrants, unlike Tom McDonald, who did nothing wrong.
Yeah, well, and we got to talk about Joe Biden just being conservative. We got to talk about the ICJ a little bit, and, we got some extra news sprinkled in there.
We always have extra news. Come on, you know how we roll.
But before we get into the episode, I will beg and plead with you to at least go over to patreon.com/headintheofficepod. We are 100% listener funded.
Yes.
That's how we make our money. That's how we keep the lights on. That's how we produce content for you every single week. So if you want to support the show, if you want to be a part of the selected few that are going to make it into heaven when the rapture comes, make sure to head over to headintheoffice.com or headintheoffice.com for merch, patreon.com/headintheofficepod for the Patreon.
You could become an angel investor and help keep the studio lights on.
Exactly.
That's all I'm going to say. 24, this Biden inflation going crazy. You know what I mean?
Make sure to check us out on our social medias as well. Join the Discord.
It's a fun community.
We got a lot of stuff going on in the Discord.
We like to chit-chat in there every once in a while.
We pop in, so check out the Discord as well. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's another good way to help the show, and it's completely free for you. You can leave a 5-star review by only spending, 2 minutes of your time.
That's what I'm saying. You could just type out any jibber jabber, and we'll say like 99.8% of the words that you write. You know most of them. I'm saying? We will say most of any word that you write. But anyway, getting started with this first review. Nice. The world may be coming to an end, but this pod is fire by Pranksta 3. This is one of the most refreshing political podcasts out there. We are living in a real-life idiocracy, and these guys do an excellent job enjoying the comedy through this all. Love this podcast, and will continue to be a listener. Well, I love you all non-parasocially if you leave a review and give us money.
I'm gonna have to agree with the most refreshing political podcast. I'm gonna have to definitely agree with that.
In this in this realm of discourse, absolutely.
Yeah. Usually when I'm like out and about, and I see somebody laughing, I'm like, "There's nothing to laugh about in this economy." But then when I'm in the podcast and we're talking, reading the news, everything to laugh about. We're having a good time.
I see children giggling, having joy, and I'm like, they don't know what's about to hit them.
Nothing to laugh about. Nothing to smile about in this life. The next one is Good Takes by Real Nurse RN. They say, I recently stumbled across Hiddo on TikTok and I immediately slammed that like and subscribe button. Let me be clear. And say that I condemn Hamas in the strongest possible terms. I'm surrounded by common morons due to the fact that I live in Alabama, but listening to Hiddo provides comfort in the sea of absurdity that is current local and national political discourse. I'm working my way through the previous episode backlog, and it makes my 12-hour night shifts much more bearable. I've yet to hear one take from the Hiddo boys that I disagree with. Let me know if that changes when you get to the electoralism stuff. As a chronic, this is around like episode 120 something. As a chronically online mid-range millennial, I also appreciate the Zoomer vibes and humor. The opening music is also a banger. I'm leaving behind my Wednesday weenie self and embracing the parasocial Sunday sermon.
That's crazy.
Can't think of a more biblical thing to do. I'm
saying, going on a slate tangent real quick. I know at least Jeremy will appreciate this, but it's related to our intro music. Our intro music, free YouTube music. We first started the pod, we were looking around, we said, this is a banger, we'll use this.
Yep.
Back when Spider-Man 2 came out, I was at work. I was listening to a video recapping the events of the first game so I could remember before I started diving in. And his background music Our intro
For
music
real?
fucking threw me off. I was like, I
Spider-Man
didn't know
2
our
the game?
episode was playing. Yeah.
That's sick.
I was like, I didn't know what the fuck is going on. I thought the
think-
episode was playing.
I think I've heard it like one other place as well. And I'm like, wait a minute, is that the boom boom?
You said, is that us?
Yeah.
Am I about to hear me come on screen?
But hey, it's free royalty free music. It's free
pretty good.
use, so we throw it in there, and we're glad you guys appreciate it after 2.5 years.
You know, that's borderline praxis. What can I say?
Yeah.
Anyway, next review. 5 stars for my favorite Michigan Marxist Zaddies by Nick Pett. This pet condemns not only Hamas, but also you, dear listener, well, that's me, for not leaving a 5-star review yet.
So true.
Even Ron DeSantis knew it was time to leave the race. You should know it's time to leave a 5-star review. P.S. Fetterman is technically a border state senator. PA borders the Great White North.
Well, you know our position. You know, we're going to be talking about immigration a lot this episode.
Yeah.
Our position on the southern border is, treat it with care. It's a humanitarian crisis and so on. Northern border, lock that shit down.
That's what, you know what? You
No
know what?
immigration from the northern border.
Now that I know that Pennsylvania borders the C word, borders our neighbors.
The worst C word.
Yeah, our neighbors, our borders up, our neighbors up north. Maybe John Fetterman is right in his anti-immigration rhetoric.
Yeah.
Maybe we should not let those fuckers in. Look at what you brought us.
Yeah.
I don't care if I offend you. Come on.
Oh my
man.
God. Time to get into the news coverage?
Yes, sir.
Starting off with New Hampshire, we got to talk about some election news before we can talk about the impending civil war. So to no one's surprise, Donald Trump won the New Hampshire primary pretty handedly over Nikki Haley last Tuesday. Trump with 54.2% of the vote, 170,000 votes, and 12 delegates. Nikki Haley with 43.2% of the vote, 140,000 votes, and 9 delegates. No other candidates are notable. I don't even know that any other candidates are running except for maybe some nobodies, including Ron DeSantis, a nobody. But Ron, of course, isn't running anymore, but he got 0.7% of the vote still, 2,000
Oh, hell
votes.
yeah.
Nobody else really registered at all. Nikki Haley touted this as some kind of victory, though, even though she lost by 11%. I suppose you could maybe say she overperformed expectations because 43% is bigger than Iowa's 19%. She hasn't dropped out yet. Let's hope she doesn't before Wednesday.
There's some reasons why she overperformed expectations. It's not like she won a bigger share of the conservative vote.
Yeah, and we can talk about some of those reasons. So NBC had a breakdown of the various demographics and how they voted in the election based on polling data, exit polling data. And there's some interesting takeaways. Nikki Haley did a lot better with higher educated people, so college graduates, people that have master's degrees or PhDs. Not Nikki Haley, but New Hampshire has an open primary system, meaning that anyone from any party can vote in the primary of whichever party they choose. So as such, some Democrats voted in the GOP primary. Those votes, unsurprisingly, went overwhelmingly to Nikki Haley. So she's winning Democrats.
And it's like
in the Republican primary.
Democrats did have a pretty big incentive to do this, considering that, again, there was no primary. Like, the Democratic primary here meant nothing. No delegates would have been awarded. So if you did want to go out and get out to vote, why not just go vote Nikki Haley? Hey, maybe she'll win. Maybe Trump will be a little mad.
Yeah. Independents made up 44% of the overall vote in New Hampshire. Nikki Haley won those voters by 58%. She also overwhelmingly won those that identified as liberal or moderate voters as well. And then Nikki Haley won a majority of voters that said abortion was their top issue voting in this GOP primary.
Makes sense.
Some interesting statistics, I think, but at some point, you got to get Republicans to vote for you if you want to win the Republican primary. And because no other state really votes like New Hampshire does, no other state has this many independents participate in the primary election in this way, it's unlikely that she ever sees 43% or anything north of that ever again.
No, and it's like, I wonder what proportion of New Hampshire voters thought immigration was their top issue. Much like how in Iowa, that was the
like
top
80%,
issue.
yeah.
Golly, man.
Yeah, so not an auspicious outcome for Nikki Haley, but she's staying in the race. And I think we could talk about the next race that's coming up because there's actually a little hiccup with that I was unaware of last week when we talked about how Nevada is next. So for some context, in 2020, there were all kinds of issues with caucuses on the Democratic side, if you all remember. In Iowa, there was a ton of issues, even people accusing Pete Buttigieg of straight up cheating. Nevada caucuses had a similar not a similar outcome necessarily. It wasn't as bad as Iowa, but there were still a lot of issues with the caucus itself. So the Secretary of State said, fuck it, we're just going to do primaries. Caucuses not happening in the state of Nevada anymore. Now, of course, primaries are a party function, but they are run by the Secretary of State. So The GOP in Nevada wasn't very happy about this. They said, we're still going to do a caucus.
Nice.
So we ended up with a similar situation as in New Hampshire, where the primary isn't going to get any delegates assigned to it, but the caucus is that the GOP is still holding. The issue for Nikki Haley, though, is that the GOP in Nevada already said, like, we support Trump before the election even happened.
Nice.
So the Nevada caucus really doesn't matter at all. Nikki Haley's not even competing in the Nevada caucus because of everything that's been going on, this kind of debacle. So the next real election is in South Carolina.
Okay.
And that's not until the end of February.
So annoying.
Yeah.
Our first election, I've been so geeked for our first election year for, like, I don't know, we've been doing this almost 3 years. And it's just like this.
Yeah, they're fucking it up.
It's just this. It's just, oh, Trump won.
Yeah.
Fuck it, whatever, dog.
Speaking of, like, fuck it, whatever, and speaking of the Democrats, Joe Biden actually won the New Hampshire primary, despite it not mattering, and despite him not being on the ballot.
Honestly, the biggest piece of news to come out of this thing. That blew my fucking mind. Because last week we were talking about, like, oh, Marianne Williamson's gonna win. Cornel West is going to win or something, and people on the online left are going to be really annoying about it. They can't even do that now.
No, I'm saying.
It's so fucking boring.
I'm saying, like, one of the best chances that, like, an alternate candidate to Joe Biden had to win the Democratic primary was win in a state that, albeit didn't assign delegates, but at least get the optical victory in a state where his name's not even on the ballot.
I was going to say the only chance that one of these, like, not Joe Biden candidates had to even gain a symbolic victory was right here, and they couldn't even do that when his name wasn't there.
And if you're wondering how did Joe Biden win if his name's not on the ballot, it was a write-in campaign.
Oh my God,
a successful
man.
write-in campaign. Joe Biden won with 63.9% of the vote, being a write-in candidate.
That's insane.
Yes,
He won a higher proportion of the vote than Trump did? As a write-in?
As a write-in candidate.
God damn, man.
Dean Phillips got 20% of the vote, and Marianne Williamson got 6.6% of the vote for anybody counting. Word on the street, by the street, I mean Twitter, is that Marianne Williamson is going to be dropping out soon, although she posted a video, I think, last night, just yapping to the camera where she said, I was thinking about dropping out, but I can't do it. I got to stand on my principles.
Really? She's really doing a great job at pushing candidates left in this election cycle. Dog, come on. I know that's what she tried to do in 2020, but in 2020 there were actual debates. There was like an actual
she was on
reason.
the stage.
Exactly. There's an actual reason to get out here and try to use your rhetoric to push candidates left. Joe Biden's the guy, bro. Unfortunately.
That's not even like towing the party line. It's just like we've accepted as a culture, for our political culture, that if it is a presidential election cycle and a party has an incumbent president, unless that president's dead or has said they're not going to run again, they're just going to be the person. Like we kind of just accept that. There's a few, like Jimmy Carter's the one exception, but he still won the primary ultimately. But for the most part, if you are the incumbent, you just get to run again.
Yeah.
You can say that's not like a beneficial or, maybe it's perhaps a harmful practice that we have in this country, but that's just like, it is what it is. People kind of just accept it at that point. And for Dean Phillips, a guy who is almost the same, or maybe is the same as Joe Biden on every single issue, for him to beat out Marianne Williamson.
House guy, right?
Yeah, it makes me think that, like, we weren't ever really serious about primarying Joe Biden. People are just yelling online. And I wish someone would give him a real challenge. Believe me.
I wish someone could genuinely, like, actually get out here and push him left, especially right now. Especially right now, bro.
It's just, I see all these people yelling and sort of LARPing about how, they want to be revolutionaries and we need, like, revolutionary change. We need to vote for somebody else. And then it's like, well, we're not really trying that hard, are we? Like, no one's really that serious about it.
We're letting Joe Biden win write-in campaigns. Like in symbolic primaries, too. In primaries where you really don't even need to try that hard on your write-in campaign because nobody's going to vote anyway because it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Well, and it's like the people that seem to be, at least to me, to be like the anti-Biden vote within the Democratic primary are voting for Dean Phillips. And he's worse on Israel than Biden is, from what I know.
He's the guy who did the interview with the Podjons, right?
Yeah.
With Last Pod on the Left. That's what their podcast is, yeah?
Pod Save America.
Pod Save America, not Last Pod on the Left. They're just liberals. But anyway, he went on there and he said, I don't know, guys, like, we really need to be cool with Israel.
Yeah, he said we need to be cool with Israel, and he's like, I'm not calling for a ceasefire. In fact, I'm not doing any conditions on the aid either.
Exactly. He said we should not condition aid. I do not think it'd be a good idea.
It's like, that's the Biden stance. So, like, what are we doing? Is that what you're maybe New Hampshire's not representative of how the rest of the country would vote, perhaps, right? And I'm not trying to, like, bash on anybody, but it feels unserious to me when this happens. You know what I mean?
And it also makes me feel like the people that are yelling the loudest about I'm not going to vote for Biden weren't going to vote anyway.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the issue, is that we're not making ourselves a serious voting bloc that these big party members have a reason to appeal to.
Yeah, if I'm on the Joe Biden campaign and I'm a campaign strategist and I'm a liberal or whatever,
fake job.
I would, well, yeah, of course, not a real job. You're not doing anything, but like assuming I'm employed and I'm getting paid for my fake job. I would have been worried before the primaries about especially younger voters coming out and voting for me, given Biden's awful handling of Gaza and Israel. But looking at these results, looking at the write-in results, I'd be pretty confident that I'm not going to face any resistance at all.
I think things are better than we would have thought for Biden, at least right now. But I do think once we get to the general, because the people that are going out and voting in primaries, it's not primarily young voters, is it?
Yeah, probably
the
not.
demographics on that, I'm pretty sure skew towards the
young
older
voters don't vote a lot anyway.
Exactly, and that's why nobody fucking cares to appeal to them. Especially Nikki, retire at when you die, Haley.
Yeah, well, and it's I just got my primary ballot, my absentee ballot, and I'm probably not going to vote for Joe Biden. There's no incentive for me to vote for Joe Biden in the Democratic primary because that's your chance to be picky, right? But then we have a successful fucking write-in campaign, which never happens in a primary that doesn't count, where there's the least resistance to alternate candidates, and I'm just expected to take all of this seriously. I can't.
I am more worried when it comes to the general and people, the general election, the one election that people go out and actually care about every 4 years. Yeah. I am more worried that younger people won't turn out in the numbers that they need to, but I honestly, maybe at this point, I don't think it'll make a big enough dent.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, then Republicans are just going to move further to the right to try to recoup the losses. But that's a whole other conversation.
More Republicans are going to say they don't trust black pilots.
Yeah, and then Democrats are going to be like, well, maybe, maybe we shouldn't have black pilots.
Maybe school should be harder. Everyone knows 2024. It's an election year, right? You know what else is an immutable fact? Wednesday weenies always lose to the weekly news cycle.
You're always behind.
This is even more undeniable in 2024. These primary Iowa caucus happening on a Monday. Super Tuesday, that's in the name. Yeah. Wednesday weenie, again, in the name. If you want to get ahead of the news cycle, you need to head on over to patreon.com/headintheofficepod.
Listen, if you want the news when it happens rather than after it happens, consider becoming a patron. It's a good way to support the show, and it's a good way to stay up to date on everything this year as we deal with this tumultuous election season together.
Wear that Head in the Office patron badge on your sleeve. You can run around always. I'm a patron on Head in the Office. I get the news when it happens.
Back to the episode. We'll get to Joe Biden being a conservative in a moment. I think it's time to talk about the Civil War.
Yes.
Civil War II, that is.
That's right.
We're having a second one. It's going to happen. Buy your toilet paper now. This isn't fear-mongering.
Are you Team Biden or Team Abbott?
Well, this is actually, we have an ad sponsorship. We are selling supplements on some Alex Jones shit. Get your Doomsday kit right now.
Get your Doomsday 50% off kit. We're actually selling portions of a secret bunker that we have somewhere.
We can make so much money doing that shit, but we stand on business.
That's crazy. We can make a fake website. We could say, hey, if you live in Texas, we're making nuclear bunkers for when Texas is fucking nuked off the map after they try to secede from the Union.
Rightfully so.
Again.
Anyway, you all probably, this is why you're all here. This is the biggest news story this week.
This one's been building up for a while.
And we've been tracking it for a little while too, since at least 2021. But there's been an increasingly tense situation developing on the border between the federal government and the government of the state of Texas.
Yeah.
And we're here
to
give
autonomous government of the state of Texas, apparently.
The independent, the Lone Star state. They're really trying to act like it. As we've covered so many times on this show, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, he's a Republican, of course, has done a ton of monstrous things at the border, from buzzsaw buoys that we've covered before, putting barbed wire underneath the water where the buzzsaw buoys are, so if you try to swim under, you drown. Like, you're just killing people.
Just straight up putting razor wire on riverbanks and into the water of popular border crossings.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about today. The latest demonic act is putting razor wire on the river bay of the Rio Grande River as a means of deterring or more accurately, killing migrants that attempt to cross.
Just maiming immigrants.
Yeah. Now, Biden, having control over the border as the president, told Greg Abbott to remove the wire, I think, in November of last year?
It was like a month or two ago. It was when the buzzsaw buoy things popped off. He took it to court.
Yeah, he said you got to remove the razor wire on the Rivers Bay. Greg Abbott said no, and then Greg Abbott also refused to let Biden cut the wire with Border Patrol troops that are run by the federal government, by the way. When they came down to try to cut the wire, Abbott didn't let them. So the Biden administration sued. In this case, which we never thought was going to go very well, went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and SCOTUS ruled 5-4 in Biden's favor that he has the authority to send Border Patrol troops to cut the wire because it's the federal government, and that's the federal border.
There was also an issue that I'm sure made it extra egregious for specifically like SCOTUS motherfuckers, and it was the fact that Texas was using this razor wire to block off access to the Rio Grande that the feds need to get into the river to save people to conduct rescue missions, because a huge point of contention with this case is within Eagle Pass, where this razor wire was, there were, I think, 3 migrants that died.
2 of them children.
2 of them children, and I think 2 of the migrants that died, the feds knew about, but they couldn't get into the river to go rescue because the razor wire was blocking their path.
Yeah, because the Texas government wasn't letting them cut the razor wire.
Insane.
And they were like, okay, like Border Patrol, like I would say inherently conservative already.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But the fact that they were like, ayo, we can't just let people die in the river. And then the Texas government was like, yeah, we can. Yeah, we can. And so 2 kids, and I think if not a mother, then a woman also died because they wouldn't let the federal government get through. And so that's kind of the impetus for all of this.
Yeah. Federally regulated thing. You cannot stop the feds from doing the things that the feds are assigned to do. Like, isn't that the federalist system that they have wet dreams about all the time?
Yeah. So in response to all of this, Greg Abbott still refused to allow the federal government to cut the razor wire, even after the 3 migrants had died. And he dropped a statement on January 24th, to my surprise.
Okay.
This caught me by surprise, and I want to read.
This is right after the Supreme Court ruling, right?
Yeah.
That said you have to take this razor wire out. You have to. You do not have the authority to do this.
And so here are some excerpts I thought to frame the conversation we're about to have. So he says, quote, "The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. The result is that he has smashed records for illegal immigration." He continues on, "James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and other visionaries who wrote the U.S. Constitution foresaw that states should not be left to the mercy of a lawless president who does nothing to stop external threats like cartels smuggling millions of illegal immigrants across the border." He cites a couple of clauses from the Constitution that literally don't support his position, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I do think it's ironic that he cites Alexander Hamilton, who was like the central power guy, who would be the first one saying, like, "Sir, you got to drop the nuke on him. You got to kill Greg. Like,
sir, we are invading Texas."
Yeah. He would not at all be saying that you should practice restraint, and Greg Abbott's actually in legal boundaries here. Also, nothing in the Constitution about cartels or smuggling millions of illegal immigrants across the border. Lastly, he ends with, "For reasons I have already declared an invasion, or for these reasons I have already declared an invasion under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, to invoke Texas's constitutional authority to defend and protect itself. That authority is the supreme law of the land and supersedes any federal statutes to the contrary. The Texas National Guard, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and other Texas personnel are acting on that authority, as well as state law, to secure the Texas border," and that's where it ends.
I think the United States Constitution is actually the supreme law of the land, if we want to invoke that language. I think that kind of trumps the Texas state constitution when we consider, I don't know, our federalist system.
And I think he's trying to argue here in this statement that he put out that what immigration constitutes is an invasion, which we'll talk about in a moment, why that's completely false. And that the Constitution says a state can defend itself if it is under, if it's being invaded, which we're going to argue that it isn't. Of course, though, this is nonsense.
Yes.
And he completely leaves out the previous part of the clause that says, "Hey, yo, you can't fucking do this." Which we'll get to all of this in a moment. Before we do that, though, as of today, January 28th, Biden really hasn't responded to the situation.
That's insane.
As far as I know, I could be wrong, but I haven't seen very much come out from Joe Biden himself. He put out a post about passing a bipartisan immigration deal to deal with the situation at the border, which we'll talk about, and we'll make the argument that he's being way more conservative than he should be. But this to me is hardly a response to secessionist behavior, because that's what this is.
How are we just going to let rogue governors run wild and literally kill people?
Yeah.
It's not just a rogue governor going crazy and, I don't know, doing whatever, doing fuck all, just spewing rhetoric. He's literally killing people.
No, yeah, he's fighting for a state's right to kill people, to kill immigrants at the border.
He said in a statement, I think earlier this month or late last month, the only reason we aren't shooting migrants as they come across is because Biden's DOJ would persecute us for murder. Yeah.
For doing murder.
Yeah, if we do murder, Biden's DOJ will prosecute us. Oh my gosh.
So I want to try to take each of these arguments in turn. First, Greg Abbott and other Republicans constantly frame immigration as a sort of invasion, quote unquote, right? And this is a means of legitimizing the violence they want to do against immigrants. Because if you say it's an invasion, then you can basically do whatever you want. They often cite something like 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed the border since Biden's been president as a sort of piece of evidence to support that this is an invasion.
Yeah.
But there's a couple problems with that. First of all, the stat that 6 million illegal immigrants have come in is actually kind of wrong because it's 6 million border encounters,
yes,
not 6 million illegal immigrants coming into the country and living here now. Importantly, that stat, again, it considers encounters, events, just interactions that Border Patrol are having with people that are crossing illegally. It isn't 6 million individuals, and it doesn't account for if the individual is unique or not, meaning that the same person can come back 100 times, 100 days in a row, and that would be counted as it would be counted as 100 border encounters.
Yes.
But it's the same person every single time. And importantly, that's not 6 million people in the country. It's 6 million people that Border Patrol has encountered that have tried to cross into the country that have been turned away. So this stat is just wildly misinterpreted to service a conservative agenda here. Also, the Migrant Policy Institute states that only 2.4 million migrants have been allowed in since Biden took office, and that, quote, most of these individuals are in active removal proceedings in immigration court in which they can claim asylum as a defense against removal.
Well, yeah, because that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand what actually happens when someone illegally crosses the border. So when someone doesn't cross at a standard port of entry or go through the standard asylum process, which is borderline impossible to get into anyway, because there's 1,000 slots a day or some shit like that. Yeah. When they cross through, say, Eagle Pass or somewhere in Arizona, most immigrants immediately go in search of a Border Patrol agent to turn themselves in so that they can get an opportunity to be processed for asylum. And then they are given a court date. Oftentimes, this process takes years. And once they get their court date, they are admitted into the United States to live and work until their hearing. And then depending on whether or not they are approved for their in their claim that they're seeking asylum, which is an international right, which is something that you have to let them do or you're in violation of international law, they're deported. Or they stay in, whichever one.
And would you say that 90% of all immigrants show up to their case?
89% of all immigrants show up to their case. I think that's from Human Rights Watch.
Yeah, it's straight up not. The only issue we have with the system is that it's not accessible enough.
Exactly.
Not that people are abusing it or not that people are coming into the country and just skirting all possible regulation.
Yeah. And it's come on, I just don't understand why. So you're telling me that it's completely okay that I get it. They're crossing the border. They go seek asylum. They get processed for a court date. We're just going to let them live and work here for years. Yeah. Sometimes even 10 years they live and work here before their hearing, and then they can just be deported. Well, dog, at that point, why aren't they just citizens?
Well, yeah, and that's exactly the point, is they're living here, they're working here, they're probably raising families here without the rights of a citizen.
Yeah.
They can't vote. Most localities do not allow them to vote. The very few that do, I think, are in the north, places like New York. I think Los Angeles might allow you to vote in local elections, perhaps. But for the most part, if you are waiting on your asylum court case, you can't participate in elections. You don't have the rights afforded to a citizen. You're probably facing a large amount of discrimination. You can't really advocate for yourself in the workplace, or you face a lot of discrimination. These people are some of the most vulnerable people on the planet. And Republicans want to treat them as though they're some kind of invading army.
Oh my God,
this is Nazi shit. It's Nazi rhetoric.
It's so fucking stupid. You can't tell me that the abuelas coming through with their grandchildren are invading the country to dilute the white race. And you can't tell me that Biden is facilitating this information for reasons we'll get into later. But anyway, stick with me throughout this whole little bit here. The only problem with because in December there were a record 250,000 encounters at the border, right? Yeah. The only issue that we are facing with these record number of encounters, record number of people crossing the border, is that our NGOs that actually process them once they turn themselves into border control and are given legal and rightful admission into the country to live and work, the NGOs are being a little bit overwhelmed. Yeah. And the offices and asylum, they got a fancy title. The asylum officers are also being overwhelmed because it's a lot of people to deal with. So overwhelmed, in fact, that I think in Arizona, they started just offloading them onto the streets. That's the issue here. here. The issue is that it's hard to process them through. The solution is not to turn them away at the border. The solution is to not throw razor wire into the border so that we maim and kill them. It's to fund these NGOs. It's so that they can be properly staffed, have proper facilities to actually get these people into the country as they can, as is okay.
Yeah. So that's 2 points for you. First, that the 6 million illegal immigrants coming into the country is a wildly inflated number that is not in any way accurate of how many people have actually entered the United States, and that it seems to be a funding issue for asylum seekers, that we don't have the resources necessary, which a deal in Congress would help with, but for reasons we'll explain in a little while, the deal that we're probably going to get is only going to make it worse. But again, that's besides the point, as you already mentioned, that immigrants have a legal right to seek asylum in the United States. And if Latin American countries are as bad as Republicans say that they are, with cartels and gang crime and drug trafficking and the like, why wouldn't immigrants try to seek asylum in the United States? Like, if we use their own logic against them, if these countries are so terrible, and in places where they are terrible, it's usually because of the United States intervention. But let's say, countries that they're coming from are not great places to be. Why wouldn't they try to seek a better life in the U.S.?
And it's also like, okay, if we're accepting the Republican framing that these places are so horribly riddled with cartels, which, in some cases, it's pretty bad.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Ecuador right now is struggling a lot with that.
The cartels are not coming to America to work under harsher conditions and a stricter DOJ. Like, I'm sorry. That's not what it is. It's the people who are victims of these horrible systems that are coming to seek a better life. Sure, there are cartel members that come through. Sure, there's trafficking that happens. There's crime that happens. There are some MS-13 gang members that come through. It's not the amount that Trump wants you to think there are, but there are some. I promise you cartels are not taking over anytime soon, dog. I promise you not. You know what these immigrants are coming through and doing? Making up 23% of Texas's workforce. 23%. And undocumented immigrants, which I think includes people who never fill out their form like 750, which allows them to actually get their work permits once they're legally processed and get a court date for asylum. 8% of Texas's workforce is undocumented immigrants. If Greg Abbott actually stood on business, he would destroy the Texas economy.
Cracking down on immigration would be economic suicide for Greg Abbott.
Absolutely devastating for the state.
And of course, immigrants face a lot of exploitative working conditions, especially undocumented immigrants, exploited all the time by these small businesses, specifically in the agriculture industry. But the solution to that, in my mind, is to offer them workers' rights, not to kick them out of the country and separate families at the border and put razor wire so we're drowning children as they try to cross.
Golly, man.
That's all I'm saying.
It's fucking insane. It's so fucking insane. They are almost strictly good for the economy. They strain on bureaucratic systems right now. That can be fixed. We can scale.
Well, and it's because all they can do is put into the economy.
Exactly.
If you're an undocumented immigrant, you can't take anything out of the economy. You don't have a social security number. You can't apply for welfare benefits. You can't benefit from any of these services.
8% of Texas's workforce is subject to the regressive consumption tax. They are strictly just paying taxes into the system. That's it. They're just paying taxes. They can never withdraw Social Security. They can never withdraw unemployment when they need it. They cannot call on any government benefits. They can't get Section 8 housing. They can't get food stamps. They can't do any of that. They're undocumented. They have no papers.
I've seen people make arguments against us on Twitter and wherever else we're posting, where they're like, oh, well, undocumented immigrants come in, they don't pay any tax on their income, and then they send money back to their family. It's like, dog, if they're living in the U.S., getting paid probably below minimum wage.
They're getting paid pennies on the dollar.
An undocumented immigrant, they're spending all of that money, the little amount of money that they do, all that money, which is getting, again, cycled through the U.S. economy, any of the money that they do send back is probably so little that it wouldn't even matter.
Oh, you're talking about, because conservatives right now,
sending back to their families.
Ron DeSantis loves to talk about taxing remittances, and I feel like I've seen more Republicans come out and just straight up say on Twitter that, oh my God, no, these immigrants, they're a drain on us. They're taking money out of the U.S. economy. They're sending their remittances back to Mexico or wherever the fuck they came from. Dog, if you genuinely cared about money being extracted from the United States into other markets, I feel like you'd want to go a little harder on corporations for outsourcing literally everything. Literally, I feel like you'd want to go a little bit harder on capital flight. Literally what it's called when corporations do it.
But instead of, challenging capitalism or capitalists in any meaningful way, it's let's hurt the brown person.
Exactly.
Let's hurt the immigrant.
Let's hurt the brown person who already works shit conditions, has literally no worker protections, has to do everything under the table, who sends $100 back to their family back in where they came from. And let's not worry about the, multi-billionaire CEO, corporation owner who does all his manufacturing overseas and just constantly extracts wealth from us here.
You know, they wouldn't have to tax remittances, or even they wouldn't have to send money. Immigrants wouldn't have to send money back if we just like let their families live here too.
Real.
That'd be, all the money would stay in the U.S.
We'd have more workers here. Then maybe Texas wouldn't struggle.
Now, of course, the reason that so many people cross the border illegally is just simply because it's so difficult to get legal approval to come here in the first place. And of course, I don't know if you already said this, but a lot of immigrants that end up crossing illegally just go and claim asylum at like a port of entry, an official port.
Claiming asylum, like I blew my mind learning about this, right? Yeah. Claiming asylum when you cross illegally is turning yourself in.
Yes.
Most immigrants immediately turn themselves in, and if they are a family or a child, instantly they're granted access to the United States and given access to get a court date for their asylum date. Yeah. And if they're a single person, they're most often turned away.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy part is, I don't know if you remember this, but this was popular, maybe not popular, but just notorious, I suppose, back in 2018. Yeah. They would have like literal children show up for immigration hearings, for asylum hearings. Like you have a 4-year-old in the courtroom and the judge is like trying to talk to them.
Like, dog, what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah, but like try to follow this logic for a moment, right? Dear listener. If we supposedly militarize the border, we make it really difficult to come in here legally, to establish an asylum claim legally. If we're setting up razor wire and making it treacherous to cross the border, and immigrants are fleeing harsh conditions back home, they have no choice but to go north into the United States. What kind of organizations do you think that would push them to associate with?
Yeah.
It's going to be people that are doing human trafficking. It's going to be illegal groups, gangs, cartels. Because, like, if you can't get into the U.S. on your own because you might cross and die from the razor wire, or you could get shot by, like, a Border Patrol officer or whatever, then you're going to work with a group that's promising you a path into the United States. And those are often groups that are doing these horrible things that Republicans complain about.
And yeah, no, it's absolutely insane. You shove people into these overflow facilities that are woefully underfunded, awful conditions, or in some cases, systems are so overwhelmed that in Arizona, they're literally dropping people off on the street. And then you want to talk about crime? As if there's not reasons why they're committing crime, if they are?
Yeah.
Come on now, let's be serious.
I was going to bring this up a bit later, but immigrants commit crimes at disproportionately lower rates than American citizens.
Who'd have thunk? Maybe they have more to lose for committing a crime.
They have much more to lose being here in the United States. That's for illegal and legal immigrants that are in the United States. They commit crimes at lower rates than American-born citizens. And finally, the last point I have on this invasion piece is, even if everything we said is false, and there are 6 million people here in the United States right now that are immigrants, that isn't an invasion. Those are people seeking a better life. There's no military force or outside external force that is getting them to come into the United States. Saying it's an invasion, by the way, is the same way that the Nazis tried to frame immigration from other countries into their country. They would say that people coming into Germany, it's a sort of invasion, led by the Jews, of course, was their claim.
Saying it's an invasion is just a easier, more, PC way of saying, oh, they're coming here to dilute the white race.
Well, exactly.
Like they are coming into this country to do horrible, bad things, to dilute Western values, whatever the fuck they want to say.
Yeah. And I don't want to make it seem like there aren't any issues with drug trafficking or other illegal activities at the border and in Latin American countries. Like, are those issues? Sure. And those are issues we should try to contend with. But we don't combat those by making crossing the border even more difficult and even more treacherous, and creating larger black markets that push immigrants or people that want to establish asylum here towards those gangs and cartels. We don't make that situation any better by making our immigration system even harsher. I just feel like if we made it a little bit easier, and we're a little bit more humane with how we treated people, then maybe they wouldn't be pushed towards such horrible people to try to get into the U.S.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that we are always going to have immigration by virtue of being a country with borders.
The hegemon.
We are always going to have to deal with issues at the border. It is always going to be something that we do need to sink money and resources into by virtue of just existing as a country. Like that's just it. So when you sign up to govern a border state, you cannot bitch about having border state duties. I'm sorry. You can't do it. And you shouldn't. Nobody should be getting into government to solve easy problems. You know what I mean? This is a very complex issue. You shouldn't go into the legislature or the state government, the federal government, wherever, and think, oh yeah, this issue is just going to be whatever. We're just going to put razor wire up. Yeah. You should be getting in there to actually try and work to solve issues and work to allocate funding where it ought to be. Oh my God.
Yeah, man. That's why with all of that we've just talked about, it's like, it's just racism against
Yeah.
immigrants that motivates this behavior. It's not any like complex, oh, I care about the economy, I care about the American worker, so on and so forth. It's just racism at the end of the day.
And I don't know if you mentioned this here yet, but you mentioned it earlier. It was something. Most of the immigrants that are here, most of the illegal immigrants here are on overstayed visas.
Yes.
That's it. They overstayed visas that they were granted, and they just didn't go back home.
They were already approved to be in the U.S. They already went through background checks and whatever that system is. They just didn't leave when they were supposed to.
Nobody cares about immigration from the northern border. Also an issue.
Yeah,
also a massive issue.
And that's the other thing. The last 2 points on this that I have are I can't let us get away without pointing out the hypocrisy of us always framing the southern border in this like drug trafficking kind of way, where it's like there's all this violence and harm to American citizens that's coming from the southern border, when a lot of drug trafficking is done at legal points of entry by American citizens. Like, and if we're not going to try to contend with that, then we're not really trying to deal with drugs. We're trying to keep brown people out of the country.
We don't care about the issue. Or maybe we're even not even trying to keep brown people off the country. We're just trying to invoke the values that presents to win political points. Come on, man. Come on.
Also, the last thing I want to say, and this is kind of a side note, but we would expect a sharp uptick in immigration following COVID-19 because during that time, during the 3-year period where COVID was, I guess, 2-year period where we had Title 42, we were turning so many people away with that policy under Trump and under Biden.
Yeah.
So, of course, we would expect a lot more people to show up after our emergency, I guess our emergency provisions have expired or they've been done away with because they don't exist anymore. People are coming and trying to get into the country again. Like, I don't know what's so difficult about this to understand.
Yeah.
Sure, we're reaching record highs in some cases on some days, but wouldn't we expect that after we just went through a global pandemic and we weren't allowing that many people to come into the country? This seems logical to me. And
it's also, conservatives love to pin it on just by virtue of Biden being the president, right? And you know what? I can give it to him on that, because when Republicans are in power, they say things like, I would literally kill every single one of them if I wasn't going to face legal prosecution. Democrats don't.
Yeah,
Come on, what are more favorable conditions to immigrate under?
I think there is something to the idea that perhaps immigrants try to come to the U.S. when there's not as much of a maniac in power.
Yeah,
right.
It makes intuitive sense.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think that might be the case. But again, that's not a bad thing, because immigration isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It's certainly not a bad thing for Texas. If you
a quarter of their workforce depending on immigrants, right? So that wraps up this sort of quote on, this claim that it's a sort of invasion coming in through the southern border. We've talked about a lot of statistics and kind of played out the logic here, even playing on Republican turf or conservative turf rhetorically. But at the end of the day, it's just racism. It's not an invasion. And then framing it in such terms is just Nazi rhetoric. It's to legitimize violence against them. Because if you're being invaded, then you can fight back with force.
Yep.
Right? That's the idea. You know what one of my favorite activities is?
What?
Reading.
Oh, I love reading. I love literature.
And one of my favorite things to read are the reviews we get on Apple Podcasts.
Always.
Not only do I love to read them, but it's a really great way to support the show. If you want to help us out, go and leave a 5-star review on Apple. As always, we read them here on the show. And if you want to make me happy, if you want to become my non-parasocial friend,
that's right,
one step on the 1,000 steps that it takes to get there is to leave a 5-star review on Apple. We'd really appreciate it.
Just remember, my friendship, it's for sale. And
Precisely.
if you want to become one of my friends, you can go to the Patreon, or completely for free, you can leave a review on Apple. And even if you don't want to become my friend, don't you want to see another human smile?
Exactly. So consider leaving a review on Apple. It really helps out the show. It's a free way to do it. And you'll be one step closer to being a real friend of ours.
Exactly. Now, with that, back to the episode.
But I think we could talk about the Constitution.
Me personally, I'm a constitutional scholar. I'm
an originalist.
I'm a revisionist. I love.
I'm
the
a textualist. I look at listen. I look at the text of the Constitution.
That's right.
And I'm gonna hold true to that today.
It's a living document. Maybe it's not breathing, but it's a living document. It doesn't change. It should never change.
It doesn't change. It should never change. And we're going to interpret the text that Greg Abbott invokes as it was written, as it was meant to be understood by the people that wrote it in 1787 or fucking whatever.
Dare I say, the Constitution lived and breathed life into me so that I could be the mouthpiece for what it was originally meant to be.
Dare I say there's no interpretation happening here?
No,
I'm
not
just
at all.
understanding.
I am the mouthpiece for the Constitution.
So Greg Abbott claims that Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 gives him the right to defend his border in the way that we've described with, razor wire on the Rivers Bay, presumably just murdering migrants, as he said he kind of wants to do. If we use deduction from, I don't know, just what he said previously.
I gotta say, it's not all the time where I have to criticize our dear listeners, but y'all kind of fumbled in voting Florida the worst state of 2023.
Oh, 100%.
We got out there and said we said it should have been Texas. We said it should have been Texas. Looking at what's happening now, should have been Texas.
Well, they're running away with the 2024 title right now.
Absolutely. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to top what they're doing right now.
No, this is evil.
Secessionist talk from the state that got stolen twice already.
Yeah, explicitly secessionist, as we'll get into. So, again, Greg Abbott claims that this specific clause gives him the right to defend his borders. Also, just a side note, they've been phrasing all of this in, self-defense terms.
Yeah.
That's corny.
And it's also they're not your borders, dog.
That's the thing is, if you don't want to be the governor of a border, leave. No one's making you be governor.
I'm sure people in Iowa would love to have him. I'm sure the people there would love him.
Anyways, here's what this clause that he invoked himself actually says. Quote, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty or tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in times of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. Basically saying you can't do this unless there's an actual warlike invasion happening.
Nice.
Yeah, you can't do acts of war. You can't enter into these compacts with other states, as Texas has already done with 25 or something governors signing on to the same letter Greg Abbott wrote. You can't do this. There's no invasion happening. You can't do. The Constitution says you can't do this.
Man, that's so sick.
And the Supreme Court said, "Hey, the razor wire's got to go."
And it's just straight up just. Supreme Court doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
He's doing what I've been trying to do. But this time it's for when the Supreme Court delivers a good decision. Come on. Why can't Biden say no when they said, no, you can't forgive student loans?
Yeah, and importantly, I think some conservatives have said that the SCOTUS decision said that Biden has the right to send Border Patrol to cut the wire, not that Abbott can't lay more wire, which to me is the equivalent.
Technically.
Yeah, to me it's the equivalent of you said I had to erase the slur I wrote on the whiteboard, not that I couldn't write it again.
Well, actually.
So, of course, Texas's entire argument rests on the idea that they're being invaded, which, of course, they're not being invaded. And the Constitution, surprise, surprise, actually disagrees with them on this point. So,
man, that's sick.
Originalism.
That's so sick. I mean, when you get Amy Coney Barrett and Roberts to flip, I mean, bruh.
Yeah.
Come on. We're never going to get Clarence. Clarence on the wrong side of every big decision that
Clarence
comes out
and
of
Alito,
everything.
we're never going to get him.
I really should have checked out his dissenting opinion. I wonder what it could have been. Just Texas is being invaded. Come on, man.
Let's talk about how this could get worse.
Oh.
This could get worse. So Greg Abbott is now acting in defiance of the federal government. He's acting in defiance of the Supreme Court. As I said, some conservatives have tried to hit us with the technically, but I don't think this is going to hold up in the face of power from the federal government. At least it shouldn't, in my mind. The last time the South tried to act in such defiance, trying to skirt the rules of the federal government surrounding the direction we should go for slavery, tariffs, and taxes and things like this, didn't end very well for the South.
The last time the federal government said you cannot treat people inhumanely, they left the Union and things didn't go too well.
Yeah, and that's why I want to impress into all of you that this is secessionist behavior, right? Like the South was trying to, the fundamental argument that the South was trying to make, it does have something to do with states' rights. It's that we don't have to follow the rule of the federal government, even if the federal government says you have to do this, this is the law.
Yeah.
Right? That was the idea. Of course, the states' rights, what the state wanted to have a right to do was own slaves. But the core tension was if they had to listen to the federal government. And it seems like that's the tension here as well. I don't think civil war is necessarily as likely as it happened back in, the 1860s or whatever. Just because wars of that kind, like barricade wars, just they don't really happen as much anymore.
There's no way.
But this is secessionist behavior, and it should be stopped.
But it's also like things are weirdly escalating. Things are escalating in a way that I feel like there should be stops in place to never get us to this point. a coalition of like 10 red state governors.
I think it was 25.
25?
All of them except Vermont, I believe.
Oh my God. So 25 state governors decided that, you know what, we are backing Texas in their abdication of federal law, and they sent their state National Guard troopers to Texas.
Yep.
What the fuck are we doing?
Yeah, they sent troops from the National Guard, which is on lease from the federal government technically.
Yeah, those aren't yours.
Yeah, they're not like owned by the states, right? The National Guard for each state is from the federal government, and the state just runs the National Guard there. Yeah, we'll see what happens there. Sending troops is crazy.
Sending troops is crazy, but Biden could step in and say, they're not your troops anymore.
Well,
Within full rights of his office, he can say, no, we're taking these back into the National Guard, and I'm ordering them all to stand down. But I honestly, maybe I wouldn't be surprised. Texas has some state militias like that are completely under control of Greg Abbott or private organizations. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those guys went crazy.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either. I would be surprised just to see like fatalities.
Yeah.
And this actually become an actual conflict where like people die or are injured perhaps by another American citizen. But yeah, Biden could easily say like, all right, all the National Guard that's being sent down to the border, like stop. You're back on the payroll of the federal government.
Yeah.
You can't do this.
But I don't know why he hasn't.
I don't know either.
I don't know what he's pussyfooting around when it comes to this. Is he so worried that this will make him seem light on immigration?
I think so.
Because he is very worried about that.
Yeah, and as we'll talk about with the immigration deal that we're about to cover, it seems like Biden doesn't want to be seen as weak on immigration anymore, even though I guess that's the perception among conservatives, but you're not going to win them ever on the issue of immigration.
Like, do you seem weak on the border for doing this, or do you seem just weak in general if you allow, 26 states to rise up against you?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it really is a masterclass in power moves by Greg Abbott. I got to give him his flowers for the power move. You know what I mean?
Game is game.
But also, like, even if you are perceived as like letting millions of illegal immigrants in, Joe Biden, sometimes you got to stand on business for beliefs that other people think are bad. Sometimes you got to be like, no, you're wrong. You know what? Like, don't capitulate.
You know,
what are we doing?
Sometimes you are right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you are right.
Generally speaking, though, the idea that any state can declare an invasion on their own population and thereby just ignore federal rules and Supreme Court rulings is lunacy. That's insane. Like, we don't have federalism anymore.
Yeah.
If any state can just be like, X represents an invasion, then what is the federal government?
And it's also just by virtue of Texas ignoring the Supreme Court, Joe Biden has a duty as being part of one of the three branches of government to do a check and balance, what the executive branch is supposed to do, and enforce the rulings of the Supreme Court here. This is like the one instance, the one ruling that they've dropped in the last couple of years where I'd be like, yeah, we should enforce that actually.
Yeah, and it's not like this. It's not like it's unheard of that the federal government is going and enforcing federal rules, like with the power of military, right? Like we can remember back after Brown v. Board of Education, when schools were formally being integrated racially, I think it was JFK or Eisenhower that used the National Guard to ensure that black students weren't harmed going into white schools.
Was it LBJ?
I can't remember exactly.
It was one of those old guys.
But like we used the National Guard to enforce racial integration.
That was the Little Rock Nine, right?
I don't fucking remember.
Something.
History.
Either way, like, yeah, there were protesters outside of the school when black kids were first allowed into a now desegregated school. The state National Guard, I think, was actually against the black kids for some reason. And then the president, he brought them back into the federal government, and then they escorted the black kids to their class and protected them as integration went on.
Yeah, and that was necessary. You had to do that because they would have faced some amount of violence. So it's not like this is completely out of the bounds of history for a president to enforce federal rulings, enforce federal rules with the power of, say, the National Guard, for example.
Especially when it's already been invoked by a state to do a bad thing.
Yep.
He has a moral responsibility to act on this and to actually do something before, I don't know, we let more people get maimed under razor wire in a river.
Yeah, when I first saw this news break on Wednesday, I was pretty convinced, I maybe it's just wishful thinking, that Biden was going to be pretty forceful here.
Yeah.
Because he said, like, you have 24 hours to fix this problem, Greg Abbott, on, I think, Wednesday night. So I was waiting, like, Thursday night, something's going to happen.
And it's like, shit, Greg Abbott called his bluff.
I didn't really see anything happen. Like, there hasn't been any, like, conflict, of course. I don't want people to die because of this.
Yeah, I don't want an exchange of fire.
But I haven't seen a very harsh response from Biden at all. And to me, it's, yeah, like you said, it's either going to look like weakness because some rogue Republican governor can just do whatever they want, want, or it's going to look like he's a strong president and maybe perhaps a little authoritarian by crushing whatever this is supposed to be. If it's supposed to be some form of resistance.
God damn it, dude. The only people that are going to think that are the whiniest conservatives. It's going to be like a John Doyle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's only going to be those guys that would be against that move because they're the most racist people in the country.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be authoritarian to like maintain federalism. You know, law and order.
I don't think
do what you got to do.
Yeah, I don't think it's authoritarian to do what's in your power to stop bad things that are actively going on.
Yeah,
that's not.
And I just before we leave, I want to just maybe to lead into our next session about immigration because we're going to be talking about legislation. I just feel like I got it. We got to run through this.
Always.
I have to remind you all, immigration is not bad for the United States.
Yes.
Immigration has a net positive impact in the U.S. economy. Evidence suggests that Americans are not harmed economically by immigrants coming into the U.S. Some studies actually suggest that immigration raises wages in some cases because there's more people doing commerce in the U.S.
I was going to say explicitly, immigration does not depress the wages of low-wage workers. That's a myth. It just does not happen.
Yeah, and oftentimes immigrants end up filling jobs that like American citizens don't want to work, which is an exploitative relationship, of course. Yeah. And the answer there to me, again, is to give them workers' rights, not to kick them out of the country. So on the economy, immigration's not bad for the U.S. Again, the most common type of illegal immigration is overstaying a visa, meaning they were already approved for entry. Immigrants, again, are less likely to be convicted of crimes than Americans born in the United States. Republicans just use immigration as a sort of tool to fearmonger because they need a replacement for their lack of solutions on other actual issues like stagnating wages, like climate change, like massive wealth inequality, and so on, right? It's like, as long as they can use this fear of the other and get you thinking about immigration, they don't have to tackle actual issues that really impact your life, like the fact that you can't afford education or the fact that you can't afford healthcare. And it's all just motivated by racism and xenophobia. That's all it is. Immigration's good for the United States.
Well, shit, as we're going to get into, they don't even have to tackle the issue.
Yeah.
They don't even have to tackle it.
All they got to do is complain. Immigration is good for the United States. Don't let anybody tell you that immigration somehow hurts the United States. It doesn't. It simply doesn't. It is beneficial.
So is it time to move on to Democrats telling us that immigration is bad for the United States?
I guess it is.
All right.
Yeah, I guess it is. So in related news, we got to talk about Congress. As we speak right now, there's a bipartisan bill on immigration.
Very bipartisan bill.
Like harmfully bipartisan, destructively bipartisan.
There is a right-wing bill moving through Congress right now.
That's what bipartisan means nowadays. It's just Democrats caved. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't except for I guess like the infrastructure deal.
There is a bill that Mitch McConnell says we got everything we wanted out of this bill moving through the Senate right now.
So that bill is it's on immigration. It's working its way through Congress at the moment. It would avoid a government shutdown, and it's kind of unclear at the moment, but I think
it is tied to Israel-Ukraine funding.
Okay, it's tied to Ukraine and Israel funding. We don't have all the details right now. I don't think like the text itself is available just yet, but the bill would do a couple of things, including adding more funding for Border Patrol, set new limits on asylum seekers, give the president new powers to expel those who cross illegally, and allow the president to completely shut down the border, something Biden has said he will do on day one if this bill passes.
Biden not doing anything to make our advocacy in this next election any easier.
Well, no, and my thought was like, for conservatives, this should immediately put to rest the idea that Biden is flooding the country with illegal immigrants to win the election.
Well, you would think if they acted in good faith, because what Trump has been saying is, on day one, I'm in the presidency, January 21st, I will shut down the border. Biden's saying, I'll do it now.
He scalped his whole flow.
Biden said, I'm just going to do it now.
Yeah, so Biden said he will shut down the border. Functionally, this is a conservative's wet dream. It's an optical win for Biden, of course, as someone who's typically seen as weak on the border from his right flank. And to be clear, we're not going to end up liking this bill, I'm pretty sure. There might be some redeeming qualities, like maybe more money for like the court system to work out asylum seekers and stuff like that. But for the most part, it seems like it's going to be pretty fucking awful, especially if Mitch McConnell supports it.
From details that have leaked, it seems like his complete shutdown of the border would entail if there are more than 5,000 crossings per day, average per day per like over a week period, then Border Patrol is not just allowed to, but they are obligated to just turn everyone away.
Which is crazy.
That doesn't come through a legal port of entry. Just turn everyone away, send them back to Mexico. No more come through and go seek asylum, go through the asylum process. And the people who can seek the asylum process, it is moved from a years-long process to 6-month process.
Yeah, so everything we said in the previous section about how our immigration system sucks, this makes it worse.
Yep.
Explicitly makes it worse. And now with this bill being praised by Mitch McConnell, being praised by Lindsey Graham, being supported by lots of conservatives, you would think, easy peasy, it's going to pass, right?
Uh-huh.
That's not the case, actually, because Speaker Mike Johnson has said the bill is dead on arrival in the Republican House, specifically because Trump and other far-right conservatives don't want to pass it because it would look like a political win for Democrats and it would take the issue away from Trump that he can campaign on.
Fucking insane.
Yeah.
He gave you everything you wanted. He gave you everything you wanted. It's still, no, we have to give this dub to Trump. We have to give a layup to our baby boy Trump.
This might be a masterclass in political strategy from Biden, actually.
Honestly, you know what? Maybe Mike Johnson, leftist undercover. Mike Johnson, single-handedly keeping the border wide open, allowing immigrants to flood through, and single-handedly stopping the genocide in Gaza.
Look at him, bro. Like,
Mike
he's worked his entire life to build up his conservative bona fides. He put pen to paper and said, like, gay marriage is destroying our country, so he could get here and support the left.
Perhaps I judge you too harshly. I misunderstood your game.
Not to be clear, just to summarize this, Biden has promised to give the GOP everything they want. He shut down the border day one. In their words. Not
even in our words. Yeah. In their words. In Mitch McConnell, resident demon. In Lindsey level Gaza Graham.
Yeah. He said, like, I'll do everything you want. But because it would take the issue away from Donald Trump and look good for Joe Biden heading into this 2024 election cycle, they aren't going to do it.
Yep.
Because it would make Biden look too good. That's crazy to me. Like, that's like, imagine if I were to pose a hypothetical. Imagine it's 2020, right? The Democratic primary is happening. Bernie Sanders just won the New Hampshire primary, and it's looking generally good for his chances to become the president, right? Imagine a $15 wage bill comes to Congress, and it looks like it's going to pass. Bipartisan $15 minimum wage. And then Biden, who's then a candidate and a private citizen, calls up his friends in the Senate, and he says, tank the bill because it's going to be an optical win for the incumbent Donald Trump, and it'll take an issue away that I want to campaign on, and then the bill fails. We'd never let him live that down. We would never let him live that down. It's a straight up evil thing to do. It's lunacy. It's crazy to think that anyone can influence our political system that way, but that's what Donald Trump just did for this immigration deal.
The hold that he has on the GOP is insane, and correct me if I'm wrong, but even if there are a couple moderate conservatives who would be willing to flip and vote for this deal with, I guess, the Democrats or whatever, or probably the moderates on both ends of the party, Johnson just has the discretion to not ever bring this bill to the floor.
He's the speaker.
He can just say, we're just never going to vote on this.
I think they can override him, but it takes some time to get that to happen.
I'm sure it takes time and hella votes.
Yeah, and also I don't think he doesn't want to get ousted like Kevin McCarthy. So that's probably why he's holding back.
That's true, because this has funding and not massive Social Security cuts and massive cuts to anything that is good.
That's besides the point, of course, as we've talked about many times, that the actual solution to cartels and trafficking associated with immigration isn't crackdowns. It's resolving the material tensions in nations in Latin America and making our system a lot more transparent and accessible to the average immigrant. That would help a lot with our immigration system. Yeah. And that's, of course, on top of the facts that we already mentioned, that immigration is not bad for the United States.
You put a little time and effort in. Yeah. That's all you got to do. That's literally it. I think, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, if it was just something we were talking about pre-show, but one of the legal processes for asylum seeking that we've established is like some app that only has 1,000 passes a day that you have to be in Mexico City or specific regions of Mexico in, or else it just doesn't work. Like this is intentionally hard for anyone coming through trying to seek asylum.
Wasn't that something the Biden admin came up with too?
I think so. They also have like this humanitarian passport thing. I can't remember exactly what it's called, where immigrants from Cuba, Venezuela, and Mexico and somewhere else are allowed to seek asylum via a special process.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what that is, but he got flack for that, which is funny because this is also the guy who got in legal trouble for instituting a transit ban, trying to say, oh no, you can't seek asylum in America unless you seek asylum in every single country you pass through to get to America, which you can't do.
Yeah.
The right to seek asylum, international. You can do that.
And it's like, my last take on this is for the Democrats, I suppose. If you are a Democrat, a liberal, a leftist, whatever, you are never going to outflank the right on immigration. It's simply not going to happen. No matter how bipartisan you try to be, no matter how much you try to compromise, the right will always be more insane than you on immigration. And what Biden is doing right now with this bipartisan immigration deal is trying to capitulate to conservatives by saying he will shut down the border. Dog, you're never going to win those reactionaries.
No.
They're always going to want you to just kill immigrants. You're never going to go as far as they want you to go. You're never going to win those votes. There's no reason to capitulate and just deny the reality that immigrants actually aren't that bad for the U.S. by acting this maniacal.
I'm sorry, but you are never going to say Biden completely solves the border issue. You will still never win the voters in flyover states who see a brown person once every week who think that immigration is the number one issue threatening this country. Those voters have lost the plot. They are so far removed from actual realities of policy. You're never going to get them. They're just going to find something else.
Yeah.
They're just going to find something else, or they are already so entrenched in conservative issues that the goalposts will just move. They'll either move on immigration or they'll move to another issue.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm sorry, you're not going to win the people that think immigrants are tainting the white race by coming into this country. You're not going to win them.
You're not going to win the people who think that it's actually okay and sick if every Hispanic person who does a crime is labeled a terrorist.
Yes.
They're too far gone,
You're
man.
not going to win them.
They're too far gone. And I'd argue that you are only discouraging independents from engaging in the system by capitulating so far to these far right figures.
Yeah, and it's like you're not going to win those people over. You're not going to outflank them. What they want is, if not like a white ethno state, then they just want to be isolationists.
Yeah.
They don't want to engage with other countries whatsoever, and they certainly don't want immigrants coming in. And in the case of Greg Abbott, they just want to undermine the power of the federal government and make you look worse. Capitulating now, caving and placating to them now just makes you look worse politically. It makes you look weak, and you're never going to win those voters. In fact, you're probably just going to lose voters in your own camp.
It's like, man, I'm sorry, but like, this is why being a Democratic strategist, fake fucking job.
Yeah.
Fake fucking job, dog. It seems like they just get it wrong every turn. I'm sorry, man. Oh my goodness.
It's just like with the defund the police stuff, right? Like after George Floyd was killed by Derek Chauvin, there was a lot of support for BLM and defund the police. And then pretty shortly after that, Democrats started pushing back heavy on defund the police.
Yeah.
A lot of more centrist Democrats blamed their losses in the 2020 elections on defund the police rhetoric and like socialist rhetoric, stuff like that. And it's like, and then after that, Democrats turned really hard to supporting police.
Yep.
Made sure everybody knew that they didn't want to defund the police, tried to shake that accusation. But even if they did, even if they pass like a massive funding bill for the police nationwide, you're never going to win the people that think that you want to destroy police officers.
You're not going to
win them.
win the people that think that white people are being persecuted. Like, I'm sorry. And that's the crowd you're trying to like pull from, trying to chip away at.
You're simply not going to win
man.
them. And I think it's similar to, I think it was Bill Clinton or some Democratic president from a while ago tried to have a similar, more conservative, more right-wing position on gun regulation.
Okay.
It doesn't work because conservatives are always going to be able to go further than you. You're not going to beat them on their own turf. You need to have an actual reasoned, articulated response to what they're saying. And you need to push back on the framing that they're offering of the issue.
They're reactionaries. They'll always find something to bitch about. That's it. That's the crux of the issue. Speaking of George Floyd, though, I saw an absolutely insane Twitter post today.
Okay.
Just a little tangent. It was I'm going to assume AI-generated image of George Floyd, but white. And it said, would you still think George Floyd was a hero if he looked like this?
Oh my God, dog.
Fucking nuts, dude. Oh, if you completely fundamentally change the dynamics of the situation, would it still be the same?
Well, and it's like you act like I celebrate when white people are killed by the police.
You act like I don't advocate when white people are murdered by the police too.
Like it's like, oh, you're like, oh, leftist, you don't want anyone to die by the police? Yeah. Yes. Like, what are we doing?
It's like, yeah, I got up and screamed about it when I think it was Daniel Shaver, the guy who was forced to like crawl through the hallway and was murdered by a police officer who etched fucking like kill 'em all into his issued AR-15 or some bullshit like that. Like, yeah, I'd talk about that too, dog. That would still be an issue. But oh my God.
It's just not representative of broader systemic discrimination.
Exactly.
If it's a white person.
It's a separate issue.
Yeah.
It's an issue of just police power. There's not an intersection there.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That was a banger, dare I say.
That's a banger. Yeah, I gotta
That was
respect
quite the rage bait tweet. Oh my goodness. I saw that. I was like, huh?
I would say they're trying to get it out before Black History Month, but given what Charlie Kirk did on MLK Day,
Yeah.
I think they're saving it up for Black History Month.
Oh my god!
I don't think they're going to pull bunches.
There's going to be hella thought crimes moving forward. Oh my!
Just
goodness,
like with, have you noticed how with Kwanzaa every year they're like, this isn't a real holiday. Specifically because it's related to, it's like an African holiday, right?
Yeah.
There are no real holidays. None of them.
I'm
like,
sorry, but
there's no. They're all made up.
Not real, dog.
Every holiday's made up, and I feel like that's what we're gonna get this Black History Month. They're gonna go like Black History Month, not a real history month. Where's White History Month?
Easter, not fucking real. 4th of July, not fucking real. Oh my god, man,
So,
that's crazy.
As we head into February this year, I hope you are ready for conservatives. I'm predicting worse than ever.
Worse than ever?
Yeah.
You know what? I feel like that's a fair prediction.
Probably not worse than like the 1950s.
Yeah.
But like worse than ever in our lifetimes.
But you know what? Maybe we can make some bold predictions. I feel like the LGBTQ issues have fallen off of like the national conversation, and maybe they're making room for something else to pop up.
Explicit racism.
So maybe there's just going to be more explicit racism coming through in February, much like how last June every state waited until Pride Month to drop all their biggest anti-LGBTQ legislation.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some shit like that that's going to happen. That would be awful and not good.
Yeah, maybe Charlie Kirk's cooking up like one episode a day for all 29 days of February this year. He's like, Black History Month's not getting away from this dude being super racist.
There's going to be so many conservatives complaining. Like, oh, so y'all get an extra day now too? You already get a month and you get an extra day now, huh?
Oh my God. Yeah. Where's White History Month? Why don't we care about white history? Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. I'm excited.
That's gas. But speaking of crimes, we got to talk about the ICJ, the International Criminal Court.
International crimes.
If you didn't know, international crimes. Oh my goodness, it's crazy. But
This is our Israel update for the day.
South Africa was just awarded a major victory in its case against Israel. On Friday, so like 2 days ago, the ICJ reached an interim ruling that there is plausible evidence that Israel's committing a genocide in Gaza. Pretty big news.
Yeah, big news.
That's the international body. That's The Hague.
Yeah. I don't think you probably got this in here somewhere, but top of this little section, I don't think they called for a ceasefire, did they?
No, there is no ceasefire.
Yeah.
There is no ceasefire.
But I think, if I were to give them an excuse, perhaps a bit of plausible deniability, I don't know that they could order a ceasefire when like Hamas isn't a party to this case. You know what I mean? Because like they've called for ceasefires before. I think if not with Russia, then another conflict, however many years ago.
In 2022?
I don't remember exactly.
Whenever I know that
they've called for ceasefires before. It's not a thing that they don't do, but maybe they felt they couldn't because Hamas isn't there. But I'll let you get into the story.
Exactly. Well, while it's not a verdict explicitly stating what's happening in Gaza is in violation of the Genocide Convention, it does mean that the court will continue with South Africa's case and refuse Israel's request for dismissal based on plausible evidence that they're doing a genocide.
Importantly, it's not done. Yeah. Like this isn't the end.
It is going to take years to actually reach a verdict, and that's why this interim ruling is very important, because it will give guidance, dare I say, or something that's binding in the interim for Israel to do while the genocide is actually happening, rather than dealing with it after the fact.
It is binding, but we'll see if Israel is bound, I suppose.
It is binding, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So what does this mean? While the ICJ is now moving on to its years-long process for delivering a formal ruling, the interim ruling included 6 legally binding measures that Israel must abide by in the meantime. So per the AP, here's a list of what Israel's being ordered to do. Let me pull it up right here. You know, we always love to read. We love quotes and we love stats.
One of my favorite things, especially from the Associated Press themselves.
Exactly. Oh my goodness, perfect. So number 1, the court ordered Israel to take all measures within its possible to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of the UN Convention on Genocide, referring to protecting Palestinian civilians. The court said Israel should work to prevent killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. This was approved in a 15-2 vote. The second measure is that the courts ordered Israel to ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit any act described in point 1 above, approved a 15-2 vote. Number 3, the court said Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip, approved 16-1.
Wow, that's kinda huge.
Yeah, basically you can't, because I know a big part of South Africa's case was Israel's invocation of, I think it's called Amalek, which is something in the Old Testament or the
In Hebrew?
In Hebrew. It's some biblical thing that's basically, we're going to kill every member of this group.
Oh, sick. I'm glad there's a word for that.
Something like that. So they're saying, you cannot say we want to do genocide. You cannot incite genocide, which, that should be a bare minimum.
If they weren't actually doing genocide, they shouldn't be too mad about this, right?
Yeah. Crazy to think that they had to be ordered against that. Anyway, number 4, Israel was ordered to take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, approved 16-1. Also big, they have to let aid come through. Who'd have fucking thought? They can't turn the water off. Oh my God, guys.
Fuck, that's so anti-Semitic.
What a development. Holy shit, dude. The Israelis are being persecuted. 5, the court ordered Israel to take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the prevention of evidence related to allegations of act within the scope. They can't burn evidence. Standard. Pretty standard. Approved 15-2. I don't know who would vote against that.
I don't know.
Why are we standing on business when it comes to you saying Israel? No, they can burn evidence. No, Israel can get rid of any evidence that they've done.
It's like when we see 5 Republicans vote in favor of keeping child marriage on the books. It's like, what are you doing, man?
And
5 of you?
5 of you? 5 of you?
Really?
Yeah, but number 6, this is the most important one, at least within the broad scope of things. The court said Israel shall submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month from the date of this order, approved 15-2. So they have 1 month to give a detailed plan to the ICJ about how exactly they are taking steps to avoid genocide and how exactly they are taking steps to be in compliance with the court's orders. So they have 1 month to actually start giving aid to Gaza to, stop fucking killing everybody.
Yeah.
Tough for them, apparently.
Yeah, and this is like legally binding. We'll see if Israel complies, though.
Yes.
Right. We'll see.
That's the big thing, because I feel like I won't be surprised if Israel just straight up ignores the orders. Israel itself asserts that it's already complying with international law, and in a statement, Netanyahu rejected the ruling, saying Israel will continue to defend itself and its citizens while adhering to international law. I don't know about that one. And the AP noted that Bibi made 2 separate statements. This has been a common theme throughout the conflict, one in English and one in Hebrew.
Yeah.
I wonder which audiences each one is for. You know what I'm saying? The one in Hebrew held a much more defiant tone towards the ruling, and the speech in English, he stopped short of directly criticizing the court.
Of course.
Pretty nice that pretty crazy that he thinks he can just get away with that when we have, I don't know, Google Translate.
Yeah, and I saw some Israeli official tweet out, it was something in Hebrew, so I had to click translate post.
Yes.
And then it said,
we can do that.
And then it said, Haig Schmeig.
No, that's crazy. That's actually...
Bro gave his phone to his 8-year-old or some dumb shit. like you're an elected official or an appointed official of some kind. What are we doing, man?
Haig Schmeig is sick, actually. I wonder if this is the same elected official that said, what if we just put all the Palestinians on an island? What if we just put them on a fake island like that? A real proposal, by the way.
Yeah.
By a defense minister or a minister of foreign relations or some bullshit, but that can't top Haig Schmeig. Jesus Christ. Anyway, a professor of law and international peace studies, Mary Ellen O'Connell of Notre Dame's Kroc Institute, had this to say with regard to if Israel doesn't produce a satisfactory report next month. Quote, that's a time that the court could come back and say, you have not met the orders, you have not complied, now we find you are in the midst of committing genocide. So really what that is to say is if they don't comply with this 1 month order, the ruling could be a bit accelerated.
Yeah.
But the issue with this, even if Israel is found guilty of violating the Genocide Convention, if they are found guilty of actively committing a genocide in Gaza, which they are, and which they should be, ICJ has no enforcement mechanisms.
Yeah.
It is up to the international community to do with Israel what they will. And that's kind of a hard sell when we have the United States vetoing literally everything in the Security Council.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that we get any major Western power to intervene militarily to stop what Israel's doing. We're not going to get blue hats on the ground because the UN, the UN Security Council won't let it pass because the U.S. will veto whatever tries to come through there. Yeah, well, what enforcement mechanism does the ICJ have? They're just an appendage of the UN.
kind of fucking useless at this point. Like, come on now.
I think it's good symbolically. I think it gives some like an official stamp to everybody if they do end up ruling that you're committing a genocide. It gives an official stamp to kind of nations around the world that like this is what Israel's doing, right? It's not just online leftists or however 150 countries in the world yelling like, "Hey, Israel's doing this." It's the International Court of Justice.
Yeah, it's the war crime people.
Yeah, lacking an enforcement mechanism. Maybe it has symbolic meaning, but it doesn't mean much for the consequences that the Gazan people will face.
Yeah, and it's like, god damn, it would be devastating to see if there's a genocide conviction handed out, to see America say like, nah, actually, I don't.
Do you know if
agree
Biden
with
responded
any of
to this ruling?
I don't think Biden responded, but the State Department responded and said like, there's not like a ruling.
Yeah, the smart thing for Biden to do would be to shut the fuck up about this.
I think somebody responded and said like, well, it's like an interim thing.
Yeah, especially because Biden is this big institutionalist. He's he would very much rather defer to whatever the institutions of the world would say about various matters rather than like, go out, be bold and speak about it himself like Trump would. So it's going to be interesting to see if the ICJ says, no, you guys are committing genocide. Is Biden going to just buck every institution?
Especially if this could happen within a month.
Yeah.
Within a month from Friday, like, come on.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a pretty big development. And I don't know if the U.S. could stand the pressure that would be brought against them if there's a conviction given out and they still want to stand with Israel.
Yeah.
And I don't even think that would be right in the grand calculus of foreign affairs. And is Israel really that much of a needed ally within the region to, I don't know, destroy our relationships with literally everyone else?
Well, and it's like Biden talks all the time about how people are losing faith in society's institutions. And I think a great way to accelerate that is by the president himself to just completely ignore what the International Court of Justice says.
Yeah.
When the lead judge in the case is an American.
Yeah.
Like, that's a great way to just screw up whatever little, I don't know, relic of the past you've seized when it comes to people supporting institutions once again.
Maybe the lead judge wasn't voting. I don't know. But if the lead judge was voting, he voted in favor of everything.
Yeah.
There were Israeli judges that voted in favor of some of these provisions. Like, pretty much,
yeah.
I feel like Israel doesn't really have a case here. One of my favorite moments from the trial is when Israel was trying to defend itself, and they said, South Africa, no you.
Yeah.
Who are you to say anything when you did something some time ago? No, you.
They're like the exact people to do it. like years ago, decades ago, they're like, yeah, we dealt with apartheid. We know what this is.
Exactly. You're doing it, actually. We know. We have records.
Yeah. One of the major defenses I saw out of Israel was like, they don't have standing.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the International Court of Justice. What do you mean?
It's like, what do you mean they don't have standing?
It's the Convention on Genocide.
Israel goofy as hell.
What do you mean? I got to be getting genocided to like file a claim in this court? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, Hamas has got to actually be the one to file the claim at the ICJ. They have to first join the UN.
Yeah.
Once they're given statehood.
South Africa brought us to trial here, but have they even condemned Hamas?
Oh my God, that's so true. That's so
court dismissed. Bang, gavel down.
I haven't
everyone
considered
out.
that. Antony Blinken himself would probably deliver the ruling.
Yeah. That is some shit that Antony Blinken would say. He'd be like, well, South Africa hasn't condemned Hamas. I feel like we can't accept the ICJ ruling. They haven't condemned Hamas
That
once.
was another thing that Israel did. Israel got up there and said, South Africa, you're like Hamas's greatest ally.
Yeah, you're a proxy for
They
Hamas.
literally said that. You guys love doing foreign policy with Hamas. Shut the fuck up.
At least when they say it's Iran, there's like a little bit of evidence there.
Yeah.
Trading arms and stuff like that.
Israel schmisrael.
South Africa, that's like far away. It's real far away. South Africa's super far away. That's a whole continent away. What are we talking about, man?
Man, Israel schmisrael. What can I say? Fucking come on now. Time for other news?
Yeah, just some extra news. Not a full news story. Pretty exciting. Florida's bringing back child labor.
The children yearn for the mines.
Yeah, they really do, especially in Florida. Republicans there just introduced a bill to authorize 30 hours of work per week, up to 6 days a week, more than 8 hours a day.
More?
For 16 and 17-year-olds while they're still in high school. And I love this.
How the fuck?
You can't. There's not enough time, right? You can't. It's impossible.
I was just about to say, we were in high school from like what? Class started at 7:20. We got out at like 2:20. That's already like, I don't know, 7 hours. Then you got more than 8 hours of work after class. Sorry, dog. I got to go to the factory.
Yeah, you got to go.
Sorry, I got to go to the farm because Florida is also having a crisis with how much it cracked down on undocumented immigrants and tried to get rid of a bunch of things. They're probably doing this to fill the void that immigrants left when they had to get out of the state because Ron DeSantis wanted to, I don't know, win some political points at the cost of his economy.
Business owners are mad. They're like, we don't have immigrant labor anymore. And so the state's responding with, well, here's some kids.
Here's high schoolers.
Here's 16-year-olds.
Oh my God.
That can come work in your factories, right? It's like, rather than address the real issues with the labor market, like low wages, shit conditions, and so on, it's just hire kids. They complain less.
Rather than be nice to people who went through a treacherous journey to immigrate here, let's make kids do it.
Yeah. Like on its face, it's insane, but just like intuitively, it's revolting. The idea of like having kids go back to work like they did in the 1920s or something like that.
Fucking more than 8 hours a day is nuts.
Imagine being a 35-year-old man like working in a factory, right?
Yeah.
You come on the line for your shift, and then there's a 16-year-old right next to you. Some pimple-covered 16-year-old just got out of high school, and he's ready to work on some cars or something in the factory.
Imagine
I would be so pissed.
Imagine you're working in the factory. You know, you go out there. You've been doing manual labor all day. You say, you know what, it's time for my smoke break. You get a couple guys together. You go outside. You go have a quick smoke. And then you get in trouble for giving a cigarette to a 16-year-old.
Yeah, you could have known
because you didn't know that there was a 16-year-old working on the fucking line.
Or you show up to the construction site. You're working on this new building, and the 16-year-old's like, sorry, I'm not tall enough. I can't reach. Like, what do you? This is ridiculous.
Imagine OSHA comes on site or some regulatory body comes. I need you guys to sign this. And kids says, oh, let me call my mom real quick. And let me see if my mom can drive up here.
It's like, hot take. Kids shouldn't be working. Maybe our coldest take yet.
Man, that'd be nuts. That'd be nuts being in high school. Oh, you know, it's a Friday night. Hey, man, you want to go catch the Marvels after class or something? Sorry, dog. I got to work at 12. Sorry, dog. We have Saturday off, so I got to go work at 12 tonight.
It's like, I don't have any issue with like high schoolers working for the dad's company or going and mowing lawns or even just getting working a job after school. Like, there's nothing really wrong with that. But the fact that Florida's trying to plug holes in the labor market with child labor is pretty dystopian.
That's the issue.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, maybe our focus shouldn't be on easing regulations for child labor and could be, I don't know, focused on paying workers more, doing these things to help workplace conditions. I don't know. Call me crazy socialist or something. I don't know.
Damn, man. That's sick.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
That's a good one.
Of course, the more sinister part of all this is that the labor market will respond to the available labor, right? Like if 16-year-olds are on offer for people that can be hired, companies will hire them. Yeah. And as they hire them, it's going to become more of a necessity for households to have their kids go and work in order to stay afloat. And if they can hire 16-year-olds, it'll make it a lot easier to manipulate workers that are older, perhaps more qualified, because if you're not going to listen to me, I'll just go hire this fucking kid who needs a job to keep his mom fed.
In fact, I would argue that this would do more to drive wages down than hiring immigrants.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because so much of what keeps wages down actively and kept wages down during the $15 minimum wage debate in 21 was the fact that, what about these high schoolers that work? They don't need $15 an hour. And I'm pretty sure, is it a federal thing or is it a state thing that says that if you're under 18, you can be paid less than minimum wage?
That's a state-by-state thing, but in Michigan, that's the rule.
I was going to say, yeah, I remember that being the rule.
Yeah, well, and the thing, I think this is in other states as well. It's like you can work up to 90 days, be considered a trainee for that entire time.
6 months.
If you're under, is it 6 months?
I think it's 6 months, at least maybe here in Michigan or somewhere. I think it's 6 months.
Well, there's some period of time you can work for. You can be considered a trainee that entire time. They can pay you, I think, like half the minimum wage or something like that.
Insane.
As long as you're under 18. It's just incredibly exploitative because 16-year-olds don't know how to advocate for themselves. Yeah. That's the whole thing. They're easily manipulated. They just want to be seen as I don't know, helpful. And they want to make some money on the side so they can spend money on whatever 16-year-olds buy nowadays. It's ridiculous. But yeah, the argument that like we shouldn't pay them $15 an hour because they don't need it is like, Ridiculous, because first of all, they're going to go and spend all that money. Good for the economy.
They are literally going to spend that all on consumer goods, the most conspicuous consumption.
Also,
strictly conspicuous.
It's like some random conservative. Who are you to say how much they should be getting paid?
I'm saying.
They're producing a ton in value. You're not the one deciding their wage. You shouldn't be. What are we talking about? If you're producing, like working for McDonald's, producing billions every single year, maybe you should get paid like you're producing billions every single year. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly.
Another dub for Marxism.
Oh my gosh. All the time. It all comes back to it.
It all comes full circle.
It all comes back to it.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I hope you are gearing up for the Civil War. You're buying our Doomsday Preparer kit.
That's right.
50% off right now. All you got to spend is $300 to get the full set.
Enter code Lone Star at checkout.
Yeah. And to the people that we think will survive the incoming doomsday, thank you so much.
We got to
That's
give
our
a
patrons.
special thanks to these people right here. Caden Kraut, Lord Tao the Radiant, Chris the Postman, Christy Beck, 40% Spite, Dylan B, Andrew Harris, Mike Chaplinsky, Mattias T, Omar Zuno, Clayton LaFed, Mark Yeager, Kaz, Caleb Joy, Rich Toro, Tari, Gavin Mayer Maldonado, Hunter W, Fergalaki, Max Vesquez, Jacob Rogers, Colton Mooberry, Fixer Punk, Jim Egbers, Jeff Muzzy, Bagel Burrito, Cincy Alex, Joe Stenstrom, Adrian Sandoval, Chloe Sam 601, Colleen Cutts, Very Yook, Jennifer DeVoe, Big Bird Titty, Crawfishin, Benneth Bennington III, Alexia Benanti, Nietzsche, Big Booty Beatdown, Sam Maloney, Two-Headed Boy, Ben Shapiro's boyfriend, very irrelevant right now.
Oh, so true.
Jonathan Cassis, Luke O'Shea, Cucker Tarlson, Danielle Jackson, The Word of Microsoft, Jennifer Sines, Aaron and his Gundam Gundams, Darth Father, Aiden Taylor, Corey Chambers, Sewer Snack, L.E.N., John Glover, Devin Hatchard, Retro Mondo, Meatball Minion, Emma the Dew Slayer, Breezy B, Veronica aka V, Raxon, Ash Smith, The Grotler, Flower Clown, Beetlebugs, Murder in a Trench Coat, Lonnie Rogers, Slavic and Sapphic, Casey Lynn Kelly,
Snake Eyes and Hope of Giants, AK Gone, Aquanadon, Zach Lantian, Info Russell, Austin Greif, Marcus Corbett, Caleb Roper, Taylor Rensock, Ishi Teddy, Cammy, Tylen Freeman, Steak Daddy, Tay-Tay, Isaac Hodges, Madeline C, Pab the Pab 69, Kayla Lowe, Anna Volinick, Eduardo Diaz, KCC, Say Yes to Wes, August, Particular Pickman, Sir Capalot, Jeff Sines, Howard the Duck, Brennan His Egg, JR, Drew Batchilder, Froggy Gumdrop, Zen doing their best, Jackie Boy, Shameless, Coherent Babbles, Sasha, MJ is Sharp, Michaela Muncie, The Wallace 3000, Southwest Socialism, Jared Finch, Evil Vegan, Tactical Snowflake, Son of Ander, Vanilla Bryce, Willie Swags, Chris E, Fermented Spider, Kishan Lala, Amanda R, Hanky Panky, Tyler Justushin. I'm going to butcher that every single time until you correct me. Damian Blues, Real Nurse RN, Ashley White, and my mom. Thank you all so much for supporting the show on Patreon. If you want to help this grassroots funded movement, head over to patreon.com/headintheofficepod. It's the only way to do it.
Please don't be mad at us if we forgot your name. Please just yell at us a little bit, but please also head over to patreon.com/headintheofficepod.
Let us know if you belong on the list. We'll put you on there. Don't worry.
Exactly. Send us a message on Patreon after you subscribe to the Patreon to tell us something.
And unless this invasion of Canadian immigrants gets the best of us, we'll see you next week.